Night guards, what's the scariest thing you saw? Not a night guard, but I was a janitor for a little bit a while ago in a building that was only accessible by a key fob. You'd need one to get into the front door, and you'd have to use it again to enter the offices. And #X200B, the shift was from 4 p.m. to midnight, and if I finished early, I got to leave while still being paid until midnight. And #X200B, each night I'd hang out with my coworkers in the office until 5 p.m., then we'd all head out to our buildings. I'd empty all the trash bins first, vacuum and mop where needed, take care of any scheduled cleanings like steam cleaning the curtains, and I'd hit the bathrooms last since everyone would normally be out of the office at that time. And #X200B, most nights I was finished between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. And #X200B, there was a night when I was finishing up, and all I had to do was clean the bathrooms. I did the woman's room without any issues, and then I headed into the men's room. When I went in, the lights turned on because of that sensor, and there was some man I had never seen before just standing in the middle of the bathroom. And #X200B, I have no idea who he was, or how long he was in there, but he had to have stood still long enough for the lights to go off, and then remain motionless so they wouldn't turn back on. And #X200B, when I saw him, I just turned around and left for the night. I worked at an airport, and while I was not a guard, I was the only one working graveyard shift at my job. One night I was sitting at the front desk playing a game on my phone and the sliding doors to the lobby opened. I looked up, didn't see anyone, thought it was weird and went back to my phone. A few seconds later I heard a clacking noise on the tile floor in front of the desk. I very slowly stood up and then froze. Two of the biggest Rottweilers I had ever seen were standing in front of the desk staring at me. If they decided to attack me, there was no way I could fight off both of them, and being alone until the next shift meant they would probably kill me. After what felt like an hour of watching them, their body language didn't seem aggressive, so I came around the desk and it turned out they were actually both super chill dogs named Sophie and Mac. They also knew how to sit, give their paw and lay down on command. They belonged to a boat shop about a mile away, and it turns out airport security were very familiar with them as they had a habit of escaping the boat shop and wandering the airport. They ended up hanging out with me for the rest of my shift until security picked them up and gave them a lift back home. I used to work security for a ski resort. I was swing shift, 4 to midnight. After every shift I had about a 20-minute walk down a dark mountain road through the woods to reach my bus stop. Also there were no streetlights. There's dark and then there's in the woods in the shadow of a mountain dark. After a week or so I started getting stalked by a pack of coyotes. One coyote isn't terribly impressive, like an ugly medium-sized dog. 2 coyotes aren't super intimidating either, but 3 or more is a different story. Once it's a proper pack they get bold. The first couple nights it was just 1 or 2, I could see their eye shine about 40 or 50 yards in the woods. They'd check me out then run off. After a week or 2 more started showing up, 4 or 5 at a time, but once I counted 8. The thing is, once there were 3 or more they didn't run off, they'd follow me from the tree line, every once in a while crossing the street in front of or behind me. They also stopped keeping their distance, they'd come as close as 20 feet or less. Seeing 8 pairs of glowing eyes is creepy, but the noises they make, holy fuck. So yeah, I carried bear mace at the ready during my walks to the bus stop for the whole season. I'm a night guard, but the story is from a colleague of mine. So my colleague was guarding this quite big complex in which the security system was not working. So they had 2 guards stationed at 2 different locations in this building. My colleague gets a call on the radio from the other night guard that he's hearing someone trying to break in. So my colleague rushes over there as fast as he can. Now this building was quite the maze and required a number of keys in order to get from where he was to where the other guard was. And he finds out that he's been given wrong sets of keys. So for him to get to where the break-in is happening, he now has to go around the outside of the building. This took some extra time, and when he arrived he found the other guard knocked down in a pool of blood. He had tried to stop the 3 guys doing the break-in by himself and got rewarded with a hard pipe bashed to his head. My colleague pressed his SRT, the panic alarm, and tried to tend to his friend's wound. It took about 5 minutes for the police and EMT to get there, but he said it felt like it took hours, since he was pretty sure his colleague was going to die. He ended up in a coma for 5 days and also lost some of his eyesight in his left eye. But other than that he recovered quite well. No one got caught since the attackers just hit him blindsided and decided to get the hell out of there once they clocked him. My colleagues still work as a night guard, but the other guy that got a pipe to his head had a few months to recover and now works as an EMT instead. Not a night guard, but when I worked at Sam's Club, I took a couple of night shifts to get my department ready for a big sale event. I would get there at about 2 a.m. and be done at 10 a.m. Our store is located on a hillside kind of back towards the woods a little bit. To get in after hours, we had to go around to the back of the store and go through the receiving entrance. It was always dark and creepy, but I never felt like scared or anything. Until my last night shift. I got the unsettling feeling of being watched. Like hairs on the back of your neck standing up, heart beating out of your chest, unsettling. I booked it into the store and slammed the door shut behind me. One of the night crew asked what was wrong and I told him. He laughed and told me welcome to the night shift. About 10 minutes later, one of the night crew went out that same door for a cigarette and a bear climbed out of the dumpster beside the door. Not a guard, but I was closing at my store, around 9:30 at night, and the radio was off. We have cameras and one faces the hall to the office and break room. I notice, in the silence, that there are footsteps coming up the hall. Very slow, deliberate, like someone wants me to hear. Coming towards the door. I glance at the camera, and there's nothing there. The sound stopped after I looked at the camera. Sometimes, when you look at the camera screen, you'll see the moving fisheye ones following nothing at all, highlighting a blank space in the aisles. Last overnight shift watch on a naval air station in a building that did advanced maintenance on planes, but was not a hangar. Around 2 a.m. on my rounds I hear people talking from the mech shop. NBD, as sometimes those guys pull all-nighters or are asked to come in early. I go down there to shoot the shit cause I'm bored, but all the lights are off and it's empty. Weird. I tell the senior watch on duty in the front of the building and he says no one has signed in as it's just the two of us. About an hour later I hear it again while walking around and I investigate. Lights out, no one is there. Getting weirder. The third time it happens, it's about 4 a.m. and the senior watch and I are sitting up front watching TV and both clearly hear tools being thrown around the mech shop, clanging on the floor and hollow banging against an engine that was in there. He tells me to go see what's going and I tell him no fucking way. My discharge is in about a month and he could go look his damn self. He shrugged it off and went back to watching TV. I checked in with the mech guys the next day and they say their tools had not been moved and no one had been in overnight. Not a guard. But I was alone at my grandfather's home when he was in the ICU. As I fell asleep at 1 a.m., I hear the doorbell ring. I go out to open the door expecting my relatives. But there's no one there. Confused, I get back into bed and try falling asleep. It is 3 a.m. now and I hear the doorbell ring frantically again. This time, long rings like someone held his finger on the doorbell. I am scared this time that I jump out of the bed, look through the window to see if there's someone at the door. I don't see anyone. Scared as hell, I get back into bed waiting for the ringing to stop. It stopped ringing after about 15 minutes. I was totally convinced that my grandfather had passed away and his soul is trying to get into his home. I fall asleep around 6 a.m. after the sun came up. Next day, I told my experience to my dad. He checked the doorbell's exposed wire box and comes out laughing. There was a gecko trapped in the wires. Whenever it brought two wires together, the doorbell rang. P.S. My grandpa came back home healthy, but did not ring the doorbell. It was his house, he had the keys. The facility I work at was under construction, big unfinished area separated from the main area by a sheet of plastic. I'm going about my nightly duties, and I hear something moving behind the plastic. I figure that it's a cat or something, but then I see a light moving behind the plastic. I grabbed my baton and snuck around the plastic. There I see a man in dark clothing rummaging through the blueprints. I get ready to confront the guy, but he turns around, and it's my boss. I'm standing there, baton at the ready. I don't know which of us was more scared in that moment. Worked third shift at a long-term care place for retired nuns and priests in Ohio. I could tell you some stories about how the clergy act and they start to slip at old age, but overall it was a good job with good people in it. Nice place, 5 to 6 rooms in each section with a large common room in the middle. Would only have a desk light on in between rounds and I would often spend my nights reading. One night after my second set of rounds, I look up to see one of the sisters who rarely ever got out of bed let alone ever spoke. She had severe dementia, standing in her nightgown directly in front of her door, pointing out the window in the common room I was in, and she starts screaming, "Omega ah! Omega ah!" 24 at the time and straight up almost shit my pants. There really is no way to describe the sound of it, but it was some serious next-level Silent Hill, hair on your neck and arms standing, never sleep again stuff. One of the nurses came over and helped her back to bed, and when she came back out she must have saw my face. She politely told me Omega was her sister's name. It was a solid 2 hours later when I finally got calmed down enough to ask myself who in the hell names their kid Omega? I was a security guard at a GE plant in SC. One night it was shut down for some holiday or something. I was doing my rounds, and each round got weirder. First time was weird feelings. Second time heard things moving around and footsteps. Third time, the office phones would ring as I passed them. That was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had in my life, and I've had many paranormal experiences. To note, my supervisor wasn't messing with me. We didn't have the ability to call all the offices, and there weren't cameras inside cubicle areas to watch exactly where I was. I am the head custodian at a middle school. Generally, I work a 6 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. shift, but sometimes during the summer I will work weird hours to get all of the floor waxing in. As I am the only full-time custodian, that generally means I am completely alone, at 2 o'clock or 3 a.m. I don't believe in ghosts or anything, so the only thing I have to fear is the random vagabonds that may be around, and usually, they just want to sleep under the breezeway, which is fine. We get a lot of rain, so I try to be understanding. Anyway, our intercom system has a glitch, which causes it to periodically turn on by itself. I haven't heard anything creepy yet, but it's horrible to hear the intercom switch on, with the white noise of whatever room it happens to activate. I am always sort of expecting to hear voices or movement or something. But alas, the supernatural evades me, thankfully. Some bonus spooks: there is a draft that causes one of the main doors to slam shut extremely loudly. This has nearly caused me to pee my pants a couple times. Also, if a teacher leaves their computers on, occasionally an unexpected email will come through and play through their speakers, filling my heart with the dread of the Microsoft Office notification sound. Ever hear of the wave of cattle mutilations that happened back in the 70s? Many had logical explanations, natural predators, etc., but many are still unexplained. I had a job in high school cleaning a small meat packing plant at night, a couple miles outside the small town I lived in. That was spooky enough, being alone in that slaughterhouse at night, running the noisy pressure washer, etc. In the winter it was dark when I got there, and it was always dark way before I left around 10 p.m. or so. One day the sheriff called me. A cow had been found mutilated in the field next to the slaughterhouse. To get to the field you had to go through the driveway of the slaughterhouse. It had happened sometime the night before, perhaps while I was inside working. The sexual organs had been surgically removed from the cow, along with all of the blood, presumably through 2 small puncture wounds in the cow's neck. The vet that performed the autopsy/necropsy couldn't find enough blood to get a decent sample for testing, even after cutting into the heart. Yes, I continued to work there, but of course, was even more drastically creeped out than before. My dad was a janitor for years, told me a couple stories. One was when he worked at a middle school, he would go in early and clean. We're talking 5 a.m. and he'd be the only one in the whole building. Anyway, one time he goes to clean the counselor's office, which used to be a storage closet but was converted, but when he goes to unlock the door, he can't open it. The desk inside had been pushed up against the door, as if someone was trying to prevent someone from coming in. This would be no biggie, except the only way out of the office was through that very door, and there were no windows. He later heard from other staff that odd and creepy things like that would happen every so often at that school. When he used to work at an elementary school, he would stay even after the teachers would leave for the day. Often, they would say or wave bye to him as they left their classrooms, and he continued cleaning into the night hours. He remembered this one teacher who was always nice to him, and she would say, "Bye, see you tomorrow," with a smile, and she would always wear high heels that would clack 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 against the tile as she left. She died in a car accident not too long after, and my dad says that every so often, when he would stay late and clean, he could hear clack 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 echoing down the long, dark hallways. My dad is my hero. I'd have noped the fuck out on both occasions.